Yeah, so it's a good question about how it's very likely their Seder was different. Okay. The days when they did the Korban Pesach, they actually ate before they did the Seder. Okay. Once the Korban Pesach was no longer, which is the time period that we're dealing with, which is right after the destruction. So it's not clear at the beginning how they did things, because some people still had meat and kind of they did something that was like a Pesach sacrifice. So it's not exactly clear when there was a turnover as to when they ate the matzah. So it's a good question. I don't have a perfect answer. We don't know exactly. Okay.
Michelle, I have two short questions. One is, what were the grains that they were eating, and how do we know that they weren't chametz just because they were roasted? And also in the Rashbam parperet, what does that mean?
Oh, parperet. Okay. Yeah, I didn't explain. Parperet is something that they ate with bread, like a dip. Anything that goes with the bread. It's actually in the Mishnah, probably in what we're going to learn next week. And the grains, it's clear they weren't chametz, otherwise they wouldn't be giving it to them. I assume because they roast them, so they're not going to become chametz anymore, right? And wheat is not chametz; it's only chametz if it leavens. So once you roast it, it's not going to leaven anymore.
Basically, popcorn.
Yeah, something exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Like that. You're welcome. Any other questions?
If the time scale was such that they had to do the questions and the story, you're suggesting that they ate much before we would eat now. So as we now wait, it's a long time between asking the questions, telling the story, and getting to the food, by which time the children, depending upon their age, have had enough, and some of the grown-ups too, because if you've got older people at the table, it's a similar situation.
Right.
So how do we tie up then with now to make it still appropriate, depending upon where you are in the world, of course, the timings to make it right? I know that some people, some of our friends, for the children, will do all the songs first.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll do the questions and tell the story. Right. I just wonder how, I mean, we read round the table, everybody participates. So that way we keep everybody's interest. And we have frogs and red jelly and all sorts of other things to keep the children. It's not so interesting when there's just two people because of lockdown. So it'd be interesting to know how people have modified during this time, and how you can deal with the fact that the eating is such a long time after the questions, that if you want the children to know the story and learn by example, you can't hurry it up if you want them to ask.
Right. So well, that's why we don't really hurry it up in general. I mean, people do rush here and there, but again, there's a split in the sources between, and that's why I brought the Mishnah Berurah versus the Shulchan Aruch Harav. Is the idea that we want the kids to be there for the whole thing, or is the idea that we want them to be there about the story part, which is the beginning part, right? And is that what's critical? So if we view that as the critical part, which really it is the most critical part, right? Again, it really depends. Are you trying to have them experience the Exodus, right? Which we generally do in the beginning part. And then also the eating the matzah, the maror, that's all part of the experience, and drinking the wine, the 4 cups, right? But, and then we have to say Hallel, but that sounds more like din chinuch, right? We want to teach them, this is what you do Seder night. So again, chinuch has different connotations. Chinuch could mean we want to teach them how to do the mitzvot. Chinuch could mean we want to teach them, the story and have them understand the story. So there's no good answer to your question, right? And it's not like the sources even deal with it head on. It's not clear that the order was necessarily different. The fact that they took away the matzah, maybe the kids wanted to eat before the meal, and they made sure they didn't eat before the meal so that, it's unclear what we're talking about when they took the food away, and that when they rushed through, right? What part they rushed through. It's not 100% clear. But the idea is that you want to, again, we all know, I mean, I've made Seder for many years, and the biggest challenge of Seder is balancing everybody's needs, right? I love having big family meals, but it's always a challenge with all different kinds of needs. And it's not just the children, as you say, right? It's older people, and it's not even older people only. It's all age people. It just depends on who you are and where you're at and what your interest level is. And it's a big, big challenge how to keep everybody involved. In those days, it seemed like they were focusing more on how to keep the children involved. But I think, like you're saying, in our day, right, we're always challenged how to keep it all balanced. And
in our family,
the main thing is to keep the idea of what's the important part of the night. That's why I said before, like we could talk about the 4 sons and we could talk about that, but the real idea is to spend your time talking about what happened, what's the story, what it means to be slaves, what it means to be redeemed. And that's why we talked about the previous weeks about you want to undergo some sort of experience that night. You want to feel like something happened to you. You went through something. You came out as a free person. Those are the things that I like focusing on more than Rashot on, on different things. So there's no right answer to your question.
Just wanted to say that it sometimes helps. In our family in particular, my father always used to ask the children before we went into a section, what did you learn in school about this? Mm-hmm. And that way, by getting the children, to say, what did you learn about Abadim Hayinu? What did you learn about, the different stages of the Haggadah, mm-hmm. to get them to, instead of just going around the table and having everybody read a bit, instead of, doing that, which a lot of people do, and that's fine, but he used to say, what did you tell me, what did you learn about this? And then I'll tell you if I know something else I can add to it. And that made it much more interactive. Yeah. And I think that also helped keep people awake. Right. And it helped them show off. They like to show off.
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways, getting the kids to act things out. We always start the Seder early for the kids. We have activities for the kids beforehand so that they're already excited about, like you talk about this Arvei and Leilei, and really we, what we do is we start like an hour before shul. The kids already have gotten things going and they've written down things before Pesach. Also, we have them write out different, what would you do if you were this, or different kinds of things that they're already engaged from before, so that when they get to the Seder, it's not like, oh, they're just showing up. And also that way, since the Seder can't be so long, we extend it by kind of getting things started earlier. Those are all just some tips. Okay, other questions about tonight's shir?
I'm just wondering if as we said, the major focus is supposed to be that we focus on the telling of the story. You said that in your family, and often in many families, and also in our family, often a lot of time the focus and the telling of all the sharing of ideas and concepts happens before. And if honestly speaking, the major thrust is for us to actually spend time on the story, then how come we're not, like, through the generations, this hasn't been what we focus on, and we tend to speak about all those other things, the 4 sons, and why did Chazal put that in there if it seems to be a distraction from the major purpose?
Right. Those are excellent questions. These are things that just probably developed over time, and I don't know the answer exactly, but I always just use it as an opportunity to rethink and to think maybe we should shift a little bit from what we've been doing. And on the one hand, there's always custom, and custom is great, and we want to keep with our customs. But on this night, when you really want to tell the story, I think you really do need to shift the emphasis and the discussions. Like we think about a lot, our discussions at Leila Seder focus on the concepts of freedom and slavery and what it was like for them. And we try to shift the time discussed on those things and less so on the beginning and the story. So they sat and told the story all night, and we can make drashot about it, but it's not the central part. So we try to focus away from it. Why it's happened that way? Just, maybe because that was in the beginning. And the rabbis often in general in tefillah, they add and they add and they add. And then to a certain extent, sometimes it becomes detrimental, right? They add too much. There's a lot of things, by the way, in our prayers that they added and then eventually they got rid of because it was just too long. So a little bit probably at the Seder is a little bit like that also. They added for purposes of embellishing, but sometimes it, it takes away. So you have to always, like when I've taught classes in tefillah, I always try to focus on what was the original prayer, what got added on, because then you see what's the core. Sometimes it's hard to find the core with all the additions. So the Haggadah is no different in that way. Okay, so well, Em, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to say that I heard people that have this game kaplas, they get their kids to build this huge thing and then they knock it down. It's like they get the feeling of what it's like to build a lot and have it get knocked down, build it again, have it knocked down, build it again, have it knocked down.
You don't need cupless, you can use paper cups and build pyramids.
Lego.
Great activity.
Yeah.
Pyramids, anything, make them carry heavy. When my kids were little, we had those gigantic diaper, like 60 packs of diapers in a thing. We used to make them carry it around the house. You can improvise. Yeah, this is for a whole other Seder, a whole other shir about how to entertain kids at the Seder. But anyway, what's interesting is to see that they grappled with it also in those days. And, and what maybe was good for them, maybe isn't necessarily good for us anymore. Some of it is, like the afikomen. I mean, that keeps kids entertained for sure. Even though it does have some negative aspects of it, like they mentioned, and, it distracts them. It kind of moves them away from the Seder to go leave the table, go hide. They're not then at the table. There's all sorts of questions to be raised about these, but food for thought. Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you all tonight.
Laila Tov.